This is a great group, and they hardly need me to be here because they can talk amongst themselves passionately and intelligently. But I want to start with the climate that we're operating in. Not just the climate of the midterm race, but this climate, David Axelrod, of such distrust that you and I were talking about in government, in media, in some of the biggest institutions in the country. That's the real climate we got to deal with if we're talking about political ideas.
No, I think that's right. It's a great, great concern of mine, and it was driven home to me during this Ebola crisis because there were some who went to their political corners and immediately said, well, we can't trust the government, we can't trust the CDC, we can't, and my view is, you know, we actually need our institutions to work. We need to have some trust in our institutions. When we have situations like that, where panic is a real possibility, it's not helpful to just on the basis of association with government or any institution say, we can't trust. And I think this is a big problem. And as you point out, it's not just a problem of politicians, it's a problem of media and all institutions. And one of the things that concerns me is we may have differences over solutions to problems, but we ought to be able to agree on the problems and have...
Too often in Washington, there's not even agreement. Here we are in an election year, not even agreement about what the problem is, what the facts are.
Yeah, well, exactly. We have a political system now where the incentives are not to get anything done, because both parties are pretty much activist dominated in their corners. Now, I'm a conservative Republican. I think we're right, but there becomes a point where you have to go beyond making a point to making a practical victory. It used to be called practical politics, and that's what's lost now. And the problem is the country's lost faith in politics. I saw a poll the other day where the approval rating of politics in Washington was at 6% and the margin of error was 7. So you couldn't statistically prove that anybody even approved, and you can't really blame them. It's bad for the category, as people would say in marketing, and that can do lasting damage. We got to break this paradigm of I'm right, you're evil. And that's the problem.
But Anna, as we think about this political climate, which will start now and extend through 2016, is it right to come from a place of distrust of government?
I think we all have to work as a team, as a country, as a people, as elected officials, as media, to recover that trust. First of all, government has to earn it. But, you know, to what Mike was saying, to what David was saying, I think a lot of the problem is that we are just so incredibly polarized. It's become, polarization has become an industry, a money-making industry. And so many people in America today just talk to people that agree with them. Just listen to people that agree with them. Just listen to radio shows or TV shows and read newspapers and blogs that they agree with. And so we have lost treasuring and valuing diversity of thought. I don't have to agree with David Axelrod, but I know that some of the things he stands for come from, or all of the things he stands for come from conviction. I may not agree with him, but I can respect that diversity of thought, and I think that is a crucial part of trusting our institutions and our elected.
So Juan, you travel around the country, speak around the country. One of the questions that I've been getting a lot this fall is, how does this turn around? What breaks this? Because we could talk all night about what the elements of the problem is. What breaks where we are right now?
Well, there are two ways of thinking about this. But first, let me say, I mean, when you're talking to us in the media about lack of faith in large American institutions, you know, it's kind of shaky. The fact is, if it wasn't for used car dealers and morticians, we'd be at the bottom of the barrel. So I think that the logic that applies to breaking the partisan gridlock at the moment has to do with lots of the consideration we've seen in the past few years of a third party, that there's a possibility that you break that apart. But it's just not realistic. The party structure is so well funded, so ingrained in the American experience at the moment that I don't see the Bloombergs, the Schwarzeneggers, those who have been, you know, Senator Bai from Indiana, who have been trying to find this third way, having much success at all. So the problem, I think, at the moment is if we look in terms of the midterm elections that are coming up, you know, you'd have to say, and I think all of us on this panel would agree, this should be a wave election for the Republicans. It was a wave election in '06, it was a wave election in '08, arguably, I don't think there's any question it was a wave election in 10. But you look at this time around, and there's no great wave, even though the Republicans have a tremendous advantage. And part of the reason I think, David, comes to this idea, Americans are just sick of politics. They just think Washington doesn't work. Congress is less popular than Obama, in fact.
So what is the day after, whatever the result,
Right.
if Juan is right, if the conventional wisdom is right, it's a good night for Republicans. Is there a sum-up headline that captures what this midterm is about?
Well, that history will be written after the election. Will be more of the same or something different. And I'll preach in the Republican church for a minute. We're going to have to make a big decision. We got a presidential election coming up. We have a good chance to win. And all through 2015, we're going to litigate that. And there's going to be a big fight in the Republican Party. There will be another fight in the Democratic Party between left, and super left. But that's not my business. Our fight is going to be: are we going to do a grievance list of everything that went wrong, looking backwards, or are we going to do opportunity conservatism? And there are going to be different candidates doing different things. We're going to have a big, exciting national primary about it, and we're going to nominate somebody which will define our party. And that discussion will begin right after the election. And that is going to be the fight, and I think we can go in a modernized conservatism that is forward-looking and positive, where we get in the answer business, or we can do the grievance list. And as a practical politician, I think the grievance campaign loses. So we have a huge opportunity. The question is, will we take it?
You know, this reminds me, by the way, I was talking about trusting institutions, and as soon as I said it, my microphone blew up.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means, but
Big Chicago Ideas Week institution.
I'm losing faith. But the, after the 2010 midterm, I said to the day after the election, and obviously it was the biggest defeat since Roosevelt in 1938 lost 73 seats, I think, that year. In 38, lost 73 seats. And I always like to mention that because you figure if you did better than Roosevelt, that's not that bad, right? But I said to the president, I think the seeds of your reelection have been planted after that midterm. And he looked at me like I was nuts. Reminds you, you're an Anglophile, so you know the old story about Churchill when
Sure.
confronted about losing the prime ministership after leading Britain through the war, and said, someone said it's a blessing in disguise, and he said, well, it's rather well disguised. and I think the president looked at me like this secret was rather well disguised. But my view was that the force in the Republican Party had shifted so far to the right that anyone who became the nominee would have to pass through that very expensive toll booth, and they would become very difficult. It would be very difficult to win a general election. The question, and I don't raise it to be provocative, I think it's the open question, is do the candidates who run for president feel like they have to pay that same toll in 2016? And if they do, I think you're going to be in the same position you were in 2012.
Let me ask Juan and Anna a question, which is about President Obama, about his leadership. He said he's not on the ballot, his policies are. Anybody who's covered this understands that the president looms large in an off-year election, particularly at this stage of his presidency. So Leon Panetta, who wrote a rather critical memoir in parts about the president, said of his leadership that he often has the logic of a law professor but lacks the passion of a leader. I'd like I'll just throw that onto these small tables here for you to chew on. Juan, why don't you start with reaction to that?
Well, my sense is Panetta, as defense or CIA, any of these one elements is not president. He doesn't have to deal with the politics, the political reaction. For instance, right now, all the generals at the Pentagon are saying, gosh, we should send some troops in. That would help a lot. But of course, the American people don't want it. Now, the intermediary there is President Obama. And that's why you have civilian leadership of the military, even though you have some who would line up and say, we should give the generals what they want, the American military is so popular, support our guys. But the president's in the middle. So what you've heard from Mike, from David, from Anna about polarization and the effect of that polarization, it plays out a lot in terms of decision-making and style. That this president does not make an argument for, and I think you would know this well, David, hanging around with a lot of congressmen to sell them on his ideas. And people have said, gosh, we need to get back to the LBJ model, the LBJ argumentative, persuasive, in-your-face type model. I think this president makes the effort only to the extent that he says, I am here, I'm telling you what's going on, I'm being clear with you.
The merits of the case.
Yeah, and
the day.
I recall last year when he brought in the leaders of the Congress and said to them, I've set a red line. I would like to have airstrikes, missile strikes at Syria. And they said, yes, we support you, Mr. President. They went back to the Congress, and both Democrats and Republicans said, no, we don't want to do this. We don't want to take the risk. By the way, I'd point out they don't want to take the risk even now to have a vote in terms of authorizing military action. So I think for the American people, and especially at this moment with the midterms, there's this intense focus on the president, on his leadership. Panetta comes forward with a book. It reflects in part what Gates has said in his book, the former Secretary of Defense. And people say, oh, this is an indictment. To the contrary, I think it's a statement of who we are politically, where we are politically as an American people.
Anna?
You know, I thought the Panetta book was very interesting because it was the third book by the third member. It was third book by the third member, third principal of President Obama's national security team that was critical of him. Hillary Clinton. She wrote a 700-page book that said very little, but one of the things it did say was criticism of Obama. Bob Gates, and now Leon Panetta. And in a way, I almost get the sense that there's two things happening. One is they want to save themselves from the bad record. They want to set the record straight for themselves and their own egos. But with 2 years left, more than 2 years left, I think they also want to save President Obama from himself. He's almost like a ship without a rudder right now. We are a government, a country without a real plan when it comes to ISIS. If there is a plan, I've had a hard time listening to anybody articulate it. And so I think, you know, in a way, it's about setting fire to him and saying, look, you've got to check back in. You've got 2.5 years left. There's a lot for you to still do, and this country needs you to be engaged.
You know, I don't really buy that.
You don't.
I don't. Here's what I know.
That's shocking.
The last time I was at the White House, the president has a telephone, and any of those people, if they wanted to talk to him about their ideas about what he should do in the next 2 years, they've got his number. They could call him. They could send him a memo. This notion that, well, you know, I wrote the book now because I really, really want to strengthen the last 2 years of his presidency. I think that's a tough sell. And I think, you know, look, I'm the next, and I should confess, I'm the next, probably the next senior administration official who's going to publish a book. I've got a book coming out in February. So, I mean, I have some, but I don't think much of these books that look retrospectively. I call them the "I gave such good advice, how come he was so dumb" books. This sort of, these books where you're the co-author of every triumph, and you were the objector to everything that didn't work.
I have a friend who's a literary editor who says that every Washington memoir really ought to be entitled "A Quiet Genius." Where was the voice at the time?
Yeah.
Now, that said, I'll pile on a little on my poor pal David here. We've been very good friends for 25 years, and we run campaigns against each other all the time. It proves it can actually happen in politics, and that's how it ought to be. I do think the Syrian red line put the president in a position where he lost some of the respect of the bipartisan foreign policy establishment. Now, I will say, to be fair, the bipartisan foreign policy establishment in this country has been wrong before. But I'm pretty much sympathetic to him, and I think that was a pretty big blunder, and he's been paying a price in national security circles, at least in the opinion they have of him, ever since. How it turns out, we don't know yet.
Well, let me
just respond to this issue of leadership. First of all, I don't disagree on that point. I will say that I was not 2 miles from here when a state senator, Barack Obama, made a speech in 2002 and said going to Iraq would be a mistake because it would release sectarian forces and make America a target in that part of the world. He was right about that, and we're still dealing with the ramifications of that. But I was also there when, and this is why the leadership point really kind of bothers me, I was there when political people like me told him health reform is a really, really difficult thing, and you're going to have to spend a lot of political capital to do it, and you have to think hard about that. And he said, he said, what are we here for? He said, are we going to admire our approval rating for 8 years, put it on the shelf and visit it every once in a while? Or are we going to draw down on it to try and get something done for the country? He said, I know this is hard. I know we're going to have to spend political capital, but if we don't do it, more people will be uninsured. We'll have healthcare inflation, more and more healthcare inflation. Government will will feel it. Businesses, families. He said, we've got to do something. And that got done purely because of his will to make it happen through all kinds of challenges and all kinds of setbacks.
But let me interject
so,
here.
To me, that is a measure of leadership.
Fair enough. That same state senator who gave that speech also withdrew forces from Iraq, understanding that those sectarian problems could deepen and now have drawn America back in. So there's different arguments to these points, but it gets to a bigger question I'd like you all to think about. We have gone through election cycles where Americans who come out to vote are trying to correct for something that they didn't like before. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, as we look ahead, what do you think Americans are in the mood to try to correct for by 2016? Juan, why don't you tackle that?
Well, I think that, there's always the logic that says you want someone different than the guy that was there before. And I think in part...
The question is, how would you describe what's then different?
Well, I think you're going to have someone who is in the midst of this intense partisan environment, someone who is able to, again, speak to the middle. Now, to me, that's Obama. I think Obama, remember the famous speech, there's not a red America, a blue America, we are America, and all that. I think you have to, once you get past the polarized base, and there's more Americans now who are mostly convicted of conservative principles or mostly convicted of liberal principles, a smaller middle. The middle doesn't turn out, doesn't vote, not as interested in cable TV and ratings and all the rest. Mm-hmm. But you've got to be able to, in terms of winning elections, go to those people. You've got to win them over. You got to get them out. That's in large part the challenge of these.
But I mean more stylistically, Ann. I mean, I think America had a reaction to George Bush that was about more in the caricature in their minds, more brain, less brawn, more brain, less gut, which was not that President Bush was not terrifically bright. I know that he was. It was someone who Americans perceived as being more thoughtful, someone who was more pragmatic, who was not just going to project strength for the sake of it. So where does that leave us now? It's some of it's style, but some of it's political approach.
Well, so let me just say this, because I wrote a memo to Obama in 2006, and it was predicated on what I call the replica and remedy theory, which is that no matter how popular a president is, people always look for the remedy. They don't look for the replica. And the reason that I thought that Obama could win was because, as you point out, in almost every way, he was the opposite in style and in many ways in substance of Bush, the Iraq War being a principal point on that. I think in answer to your question, people are now, they wanted someone who understood the nuances. They wanted someone who saw the complexities. They wanted someone who would be thoughtful and reflective. I think that this next election, they're going to be looking for someone who's a little bit less nuanced, a little bit more direct, a little bit less. They want someone who doesn't see so much gray, but sees black and white.
And when Obama said about Syria, we should think about whether we intervene based on whether America can make a difference. I think a lot of Americans want to see us get caught trying to make a difference.
Yeah, it's not the nature of the U.S. to accept the premise you can opt out of being the only superpower. And that's not the way the world works. But I want to echo something David said. People vote for what they perceive they did not get last time, which means I think the next president is going to be somebody perceived as being highly competent, highly experienced, probably a governor from outside Washington, and will be perceived as tough. Because I think that's the deficit in perception they're going to try to fill.
Well, I think we're going to get somebody that's been a chief executive, either of a state or of a maybe large department, the government agency. I think we're going to get somebody with experience, frankly. Mm-hmm. If you're going to go for something that President Obama did not offer as candidate Obama, it was governing experience. And I think we've paid the price for that by not having somebody that had learn the ways of dealing with Congress and getting things done, achieving things. I think that's why governors are going to be very attractive candidates, at least on the Republican side.
Right, but
well, let me just say, David, the beautiful gorilla in the room is Hillary Clinton that we're not discussing here. I mean, people are going to say, hey, you know what? We've never had a woman, and here's a woman who comes with a high degree of experience that's immediately going to be attacked. You know, what was her record at state? What did she do as a senator? All this. But for most Americans, she's a known quantity. She's withstood a great deal of criticism. She's going to come in as something very different. You can't say it in terms of the stylistic way that you guys have been portraying it, saying, oh, she's definitely more black and white than Obama.
I think you can. I think she's a much less nuanced person than Obama, and I think that's to her advantage.
Well, I think she's really a smart person, and I think that she, even to the point where people have accused her, her critics. But her critics have accused her of using that for all kinds of evil purpose. But I'm just saying, she is not as, I mean, in her book, though, I must say, she tries to be, with regard to foreign policy, much more clear-headed. You know, you can't have a don't do stupid stuff policy.
So, but the ideal presidential bumper sticker is never a rear-view mirror, and that'll be her challenge. She's formidable,
expand on that. I don't like the word playbook makes it. What is the argument against her that will be made and that you think could actually take root?
No vision for the future. The campaign slogan of the Hillary Clinton campaign that exists without officially existing now is, inside the Democratic, is be for what's going to happen. And that is, if you want to move ward healers in Albany, that's a pretty good slogan. You want to capture the attention of the country, I think you can do better. So it's the vision gap, and we'll see how she does. It's very early. She's quite formidable. I think she'll have trouble in the primary from the left, which is where a lot of the energy is in the Democratic Party. Ask Mayor de Blasio, nice guy, good patriot, loves New York, but Trotsky would say, too much. that is the strong progressive left is back, and she'll be attacked as a senator from Goldman Sachs. Now, she's hard to beat if she runs. I think Elizabeth Warren could give her the race of her life. How many here would vote for Elizabeth Warren over Hillary Clinton? Oh, the applause dies because they're taking names backstage.
Right.
Be for what's going to happen.
Yeah, you know, I was interested in the speech that she made last week in Philadelphia because she dove into the issue of the viability of the middle class, of the lack of economic mobility in the country. And I think if she sticks with that and develops it and develops ideas about what to do about that, she'll be a very formidable candidate. Her problem is the same problem that she had in 2008, which is that the candidacy has gotten out in front of the rationale for it. And that's very dangerous, and she needs to remedy that and do it quickly.
Juan,
I think Hillary Clinton has got the same problem she had in 2008, which is why Barack Obama beat her. She's safeguarded. She sticks to a script. I think her biggest problem is going to be the expectations game. If you see Hillary Clinton on a stage with Bill Clinton, for example, like we did at the Harkin Steak Fry, you hear Bill Clinton speak and then you hear Hillary Clinton speak. It's a dramatic difference. You hear Barack Obama speak, you hear Hillary Clinton speak. It's a dramatic difference. And I think, there's huge expectations on her because of the historical moment, what she represents as the first female candidate. And the question is, will she be able to meet those expectations? Because let's face it, she won't set the world on fire like her husband or her predecessor.
So we've got about 3 minutes left. On the right, Anna, usually a two-person race through the primaries. Who are your early two? I won't hold you to it, but who do you like? Who do you think stands out?
On the
right.
On the Republican
Among the
side?
Republicans, yeah.
Well, look, I'm from Florida, so if I don't go for my two Floridians, they're going to deport me out of the state. There's one of, I like Jeb Bush. I'm a Floridian. He was a terrific governor.
Do you think he wants to run?
I think he doesn't know yet, and I think he's not going to allow himself to make a premature decision. But I do think he's thinking about it seriously. We know he is a serious guy. Yeah. He doesn't tease for the sake of teasing. He doesn't need to sell a book or get on Dancing with the Stars or get a cable gig. If he does it for real, and he goes all in. And it's a big decision for anybody.
Mike, how do you see it?
Well, I'm Jeb's political consultant for the last 18 years, so I can tell you exactly what he's due, but I'm not. He's still deciding. He has not decided yet. He's thinking about it in a very thoughtful way. The Republican process is a bracket system with two silos, regular Republican and the movement conservatives. And so there will be a dominant candidate on in each silo. Historically, the regular Republican candidate has prevailed, but there's a lot of energy in the movement conservative silo. So I think Ted Cruz is a big deal in that silo. I think Rick Perry is going to have a comeback in that silo. And on the other side, I think Jeb would be, he is, you all laugh, but in a Republican primary, his great tormentor, Emil Berliner, the inventor of the microphone, is long dead. Perry will be back. In the establishment silo, you've got Chris Christie.
Since he's been wearing magic glasses, he can remember all sorts of things.
He will be
because he's
formidable.
got a microphone.
You've got Christie, you've got Marco Rubio. You could have Scott Walker, the governor of Wisconsin, a little north of here, if he gets reelected. Oh, I am in Cook County, aren't I?
So because we don't have that much action on our side, let me just comment on your side. we will have a competitive presidential election if Jeb Bush or some nominee has the strength to challenge the base of the party on some key issues, whether it's immigration reform or education reform or some of these issues that he's been talking about. Because I think that to become a national candidate, you need to be able to show the American people that you're not going to be led around by the base of your party. And that will determine whether there's going to be a really competitive race in 2016.
He's the strongest opportunity conservative, and he is a conservative. And I think he's our strongest candidate should he decide to run. But it's a little too early. Right now we're focused on the midterms where we will, I think, have a pretty good Republican night. We're going to win the Senate, I believe.
And Juan, do you think, and as a closing thought, if Republicans take the Senate, is that a blessing for President Obama? Do the next 2 years change at all for him with a Republican Congress?
Isn't it?
And this guy, as Churchill said. No, I mean, the argument is that, in fact, when you have one party in control of Capitol Hill and the president from another party, it's a highly productive Congress. And as you all know, Congress has been historically unproductive. This is worse than the do-nothing Congress of the Truman years. So there's the possibility there that you get an agenda where there's some agreement, and you have agreement potential in everything from tax reform to looking at some of the infrastructure spending issues that are out there. But the fact is that if you talk to someone like Mitch McConnell, the Senate minority leader at the moment, he's saying, oh, you know what, we've got too much regulation of Wall Street, so we need to cut back on Dodd-Frank. Let's go back and have some more votes on Obamacare, you know. And again, this is all symbolism to play to the base that Mike is talking about. And let's repeal some of the environmental concerns being regulations from EPA and drill, baby, drill. Well, I mean, I just think, yeah, this will play great for the talk radio show crowd, but will it sell with the American people? I think, in fact, when you say, is it good for President Obama, is it good for Democrats, it may be good in the sense that it shows the Republican inability to govern and to set an agenda that people can relate to. I just did a column for The Hill this week where Lindsey Graham, I think, took an opening shot at Marco Rubio because he said Marco Rubio wouldn't stand up to the far right on immigration reform. And Graham says he's thinking of running for president because he's beyond that. Well, I don't know what it means to be beyond that, but I anticipate.
He's getting reelected on November.
Well, I think that it's going to be, you know, coming back to what Michael was talking about, I think there's going to be a fight right now if you have base Republicans, grassroots Tea Party folks versus establishment Republicans on Capitol Hill, and that civil war will be writ large for all to see.
All right, we are going to leave it there. Thank you all.